Hey guys, what's going on? It's SpotTheOzzie here, your favorite fantasy fanatic, doing the round 1 fantasy analysis for NRL Fantasy, and I'm going to be doing this all the way from round 1 all the way through to round 26. So if you want to see my team list before they go out and play that weekend, be sure to subscribe because I'll be uploading a video every Tuesday, Wednesday before the round kicks off. This is to give a leg up on the rookies, and this is also to give a different opinion upon what many other people do with their fantasy teams. That way you have a bit of an insight as to my adjustments for my team and my entire team list. I'll be going them from top to bottom in detail and why I've picked those players. So let's get it off by talking about Team List Tuesday. Team List Tuesday has changed completely. So 21 players are named on Team List Tuesday now. You don't know if the 1 to 17 are actually going to start. They might be last minute moved in. Like for example with the Cowboys at the moment, will Kalen Ponga start or will Bowen of course come in? So let's talk about what I do with my team in terms of making a new team for a season. First of all, I love to stack my team top heavy, and then bottom out is a much cheaper side. And the reason why I do this is because generally speaking, the guys who play in the front, second or hooker roles or positions are generally more consistent scorers. They are the guys who are consistently going to come out, get the base stats, which are, tackle counts, rather than attacking stats of, offloads, tries, etc. So the reason why I stack all my money up there is because I know these guys week in, week out are going to consistently score points. Let's look at my first position, the hooker role. I've gone with Cameron McInnes. They always say in the fantasy world, rule number 1 is always get Cam Smith. Now Cam Smith is, of course, let's pull him up. He is considered the god or CS9 of fantasy world, with a price tag of $631,000 at 66.61 points. Now, did you know with Cameron McInnes going to the Dragons role, he's probably going to be playing 80 minutes. And when Cameron McInnes played 80 minutes last season at the Rabbitohs, he actually averaged 60 points. That's not far off Cameron Smith's average. At the moment, McInnes is down to 49.9. His low scoring round was 16, but highest round was 97. I'm going to take a bit of a punt here because I believe that the price difference of almost $160,000 for that amount of a difference isn't that great, considering that I'm thinking that McInnes is going to get the full-time role. So that's why I've gone with him. I've also stacked it, my reserve role, with a complete rookie, Jayden Brailey. Now, I know he's not going to be getting the 80 minutes because Fernando Brown is going to be playing in the 17, so it's likely that Jayden Brailey is probably going to get 60 to 50 minutes. But I think he's going to be scoring high enough in order to secure himself 30, 40 points, which is really handy to have in that second hooker spot. Other people might tend to do things a little bit differently. They might go with your Cameron Smiths and your Andrew McFadden, have 2 scorers up there. That's a lot of dough just for that particular position. I like to have one solid hooker. That way I can always back away from using Brailey as a reserve and put it on one of my other players. The rookies that I'm considering is Kaufusi because he's been named at number 9 for Parramatta, which also means he has great buy coverage. He's only 185,000. Now, he has never played 80 minutes in the hooker role. I don't know how he's going to go. The fact is, Parramatta has 4 forwards on the bench, and the coach, Brad Arthur, has actually stated that, well, they want a hooker to play the full 80 minutes. And it looks like if he's going to be playing there at round 1, and he did as he did in the trial, he's likely to play there for round 2, round 3, round 4, etc. He's a bit more price heavier than Brailey by about 60,000. I might do a last minute swap to bring in Kaufusi for Jayden Brailey. It really depends on a couple of things. But those are 2, cheapy options for that hooker role that you can definitely know that they're going to go up in price. The fact that Jayden Brailey's been sworn into that position. Now, he was one of the big surprises for me, was Kaufusi being named as a starting second row position for the Melbourne Storm, and that's because Tohu Harris is out at the moment, and, Proctor's also moved away from the team. He should have that spot for about 8 rounds, which means after 5 rounds, whatever they're averaging, their price tag has been fully hit. So if, for example, he was to average 35 points, he would go up to the money value of 35 points. Obviously, undervalued heavily at 203, because that is what is the average right now. They're sitting at 21.4. Now, given that we're not sure if he's going to be an 80-minute player, he's still a necessity for your team. Front row and second row dual position player, that is huge. I'm definitely going to be signing up Felise Kaufusi. He's definitely going to be inside my team come that round indefinitely. very, very cheap at the moment. Must grab, in my opinion. Only less than 6% of the league has him. James Graham. I've gone with the guy with the brawn. I've gone with Graham. He's very expensive at $541,000. Let's face it, doesn't really miss games. Doesn't play State of Origin because, you know, his origins are of English descent. He is just consistent. He's the hard-hitting brick wall from England, and I just needed to have that core base, and like that's the one position I wanted to stack. Very high priced. I think if we look at the forwards, the only one options above him are Ryan James and Andrew Fifita. I just think that Graham might be a little bit more consistent than those two in those particular items. Now, who else have I gone to? Matagi from Parramatta. He's starting prop. We saw big things from him at the Auckland Nines. He has never started. He usually interchanges. He was interchanging from Penrith, and he'd usually play about 20 to 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. I think given that he's going to be starting, we'll at least see 45 minutes from him, which means we'll see a dramatic increase in his value. 6% of the league has him at the moment. That means he's a bit of a pod. Anything under 10% of what the league has is generally considered a pod. One of the biggest surprises was Zane Musgrove. Guy was named at prop, number 8. Everyone was expecting Burgess, George Burgess that is, to get that position, but unfortunately didn't get named at all. He actually got named at like jersey number 21, so that's a big note to say. He's probably less than a consideration for most people. Less than 1% of people actually own him at the moment. In fact, 502 people. That's absolutely insane. Now, he should do quite well in that starting role, just like Matagi. Who have I got my second row? Joshy McGuire. Now, Joshy McGuire moves from the front row into the lock position for Corey Parker. McGuire might not necessarily go up in value, but I don't think he'll depreciate either, and I think he's going to be in that spot in the lock position, either scoring the same or just going a little bit more than what he usually does. He averages about 50 minutes on the field. Going to lock doesn't necessarily mean he'll get 80 minutes because, as you know, last year Corey Parker was not getting 80 minutes, but Josh McGuire's minutes will probably go up, considering I think at least to about 60 to 65 minutes, and that's going to push his value up. I think that will make him more in the center as well, and, you know, that will bring up some of his base stats, which is just his tackling, and he might get a little bit more involved in the play as well. Sammy Burgess, I couldn't avoid. Now, Sammy Burgess had a bit of a up and down season last year with having that neck injury during that rained out game when they played the Saints. He only scored 11 points in that round, which also brings down his value a little bit. But also means that he's got a lot of high potential. He's obviously starting lock for the Rabbitohs. I think he'll have a lot of work to do around that ruck as well. I think he's going to be another consistent scorer like James Graham. That's why I've gone with him in particular. Jack de Belin. I don't think you can go wrong with Jack de Belin. I think the guy is an absolute freak. And what was interesting about him is that last year he kind of played a little bit of halves and then he played a little bit of lock. When he plays lock, which is what he's destined to play now, he actually scores 61 points on average comparing to halves where he was scoring about 50 points. So that's how we got a bit of a weird average at 59.2. He was also interchanged off the bench like a handful of times, which is a little bit silly when you're considering the impact that he had for the attack of that team much needing the attacking stats that he kind of possesses at the lock position when he does fill in for that role. So I've locked him in. I've put him in for captain now. That might change. The captaincy might change, but I think he's a definite lock for my team to be sitting there. No dramas. Here's the interesting part. Here's my cashies. Frank Winterstein was named at number 11 for the Manly Seagulls. Huge question mark because the guy's not really known. I mean, his brother is more known at the Cowboys. He's one of the wingers. But with Frankie the Tank, as I'd like to call him, I mean, not to take anything away from Frank Pritchard, but I think with Frank Winterstein, we might see something a little bit different. Considering he's going to be starting at number 11 on the flank, he has a lot of upside to make it $175,000, so I'm willing to take that risk. He's not a point scorer for me because I don't have to reserve him necessarily, so I'm willing to take that risk. Curtis Sironen is the other choice, where he's about $250,000, so immediately $175,000 for a second row is a bit of a no-brainer, but who knows with Trent Barrett? He might swap players left, right, and centre like he did last season. The other thing is Darcy Lussick might come back at prop, and if he comes back, that might put Kapau back into the second row, which puts Frank back onto the bench. But knowing the fact that he's a starter will probably mean if he does get knocked back, he's going to go back onto the interchange rather than straight, out of the team altogether. So I think he has a lot of upside to make there. So that's good news for us. Luke Yates and also Sam Stone were two unknowns named for the Newcastle team. Luke Yates, dual position, front and second row. Sam Stone, second row. Look, I think these guys could do anything. We don't really know much about them. I think the fact that they're the cheapies in the second row, you'll see a lot of people will jump on them now. It's currently sitting at 0%, but I expect tomorrow on Wednesday that everyone's going to be jumping on them left, right, and center. And you should expect to see them, their rates increase dramatically. If you don't, I don't know who you would be picking in those spots. I mean, there's not many options other than those two cash cows right at that lower mark in the second row. Now, for my halves, here's a little bit of an interesting story. I'm going with Corey Norman. I think he's going to be consistent. He does play for Parramatta, which is my team. He's going to be having good buy coverage for those rounds when State of Origin kicks off. I think he's got a lot to prove this year, given the fact that he got, a bit of a whammy last year with his off-field antics. But I think he's going to be good to go. I think he's the man to go to for the Parramatta as their playmaker, because there's not going to be a Kieran Foran. Clint Gutherson is going to be the 5'8". I just don't see that partnership working. I feel like Norman will be getting a lot more ball, a lot more kick meters, so I expect him to consistently score around that 50 mark. Bryce Cartwright is not actually playing in the halves. I wanted to go with Bryce Cartwright because I wanted a consistent scorer in the halves. Now, let's face it, if I pull up the halves right now and get rid of that filter, Nathan Cleary, Mitchell Pearce, Sean Johnson, Cameron Munster, Cody Walker, Daly Cherry-Evans, Ben Hunt, Jonathan Thurston, Adam Reynolds, not named, Kip Cronk, all great players, but if you go to their scores, they're sporadic. Like Thurston, lowest score is 30. Ben Hunt, lowest score is 25. Cherry Evans, lowest score is 32. If you click on Bryce Cartwright, I think he had one really bad round. If you just tally all the games where he played 80 minutes last year, which you would imagine he'll continue to do in the back row, he scored 54.75 as an average. That's pretty good. Considering he's going to be in the halves, I just want a consistent scorer. I understand that an Anthony Milford might go out and get 95 points, but he might have a bad start to the season. We've seen that before where he ends up scoring like 19, 30, then 20. That's why his average is so low, because he's not consistent. And that's one of the things with these halves guys, is that they can have a really great round and they can have a really poor round. At least if you're in the second row, you're consistently getting the base stats. And those base stats are, again, going back to your tackle counts. So I just think he'll be getting a lot more ball in the second row. I think he's going to be consistently scoring better than when he was in the halves. We know that for a fact from last year's stats. So I just wanted to bring that in and just limit the possibility of scoring low based on the halves. As my backups, I've got Kane, Elgey, no-brainer there, very undervalued, didn't play last year due to his injuries. And remember, if you look at those stats from the year before, averaging 30 to 40 points, there's possibly a $100,000 to $200,000 upside for him alone. 44%, I think everyone knows to pick him. Surprised that not everyone has him. The other one, this is really tricky. This is a really tricky spot because I don't like to waste money on people who aren't going to play, and two, if they're going to sit on my bench, aren't going to make value. So, for example, a lot of people going with Jai Field. Let's have a look. Let's go from low to high. Jamal, that's not playing. Jai Field, there we go. 25% have picked him. He's named at the 17th man for the Dragons. Josh McCrone looks like he's secured that spot. That means Jai Field's time there is going to be null and void. There's going to be almost nothing. The other guy is Afo, is Hingano, who's going to be playing 2 rounds max before Kieran Foran signs with the New Zealand Warriors and starts in round 3. He's going to have no value increase unless Sean Johnson gets injured or Kieran Foran does a huge backflip last minute, which I can't imagine he'd be doing considering all the teams are locked in for their halves. I think it's a goer that you'd be a bit silly to jump on him now because he's going to go up maybe 10, 20 grand. 10, 20 grand isn't worth wasting a trade on, and you don't know how well he's going to go because Sean Johnson is going to be the go-to guy every time they feed out a dummy half. The other thing is, Benny Hampton was my other pick. Why did I pick Benny Hampton? Benny Hampton might not have a lot of game time. Let's face it, he might not. He might go in for 10 minutes and then score 16 points, but he's only $156,000. So I'm willing to risk Ben Hampton not playing, but not costing me anything, because there's no value in that halves position for me to grab elsewhere. Like, that's the reality of the situation. So Benny Hampton, anything could happen. He could go to the Cowboys. You know, one of the halves gets injured. Morgan, Thurston. If you looked at last year's stats, when Hampton did start in the halves, which was about 2 games, he scored 35 points. If he gets a spot there for whatever reason, guess what? Benny Hampton's now your go-to guy for being a bit of a cashy. You don't know what the rotation's going to be with their hooker. He might actually play 40 minutes, which means he'd definitely go up on 156,000. A lot of people are onto him already. 10% of owners already have picked him up on their teams. Now, the center position. Now, centers generally, and wingers, of course, generally score the lowest of everyone. Everyone. They're consistently the lowest scoring games because they might not get a lot of ball. They don't do a lot of, defensive stats. They barely make any tackles, if anything. The person who makes a lot of tackles in the centers is Ewan Eichen, and that's because he used to be on the inside of Benji Marshall rather than on the outside. He was the only one that would be on the inside of his half, and therefore he was involved in a lot more tackles being on that other side of the flank. So his stats went up hugely. So what I've done here is, and a lot of people have done this, is grabbed Sione Matautia, because guess what? He averages much higher, about that 40 to 45 mark, when he actually plays in the second row. When he was playing in center, he was getting about 10 to 20, which is almost nothing. That means he's undervalued at 299,000, but it also means that you're going to be securing a spot in your center position for a guy to be scoring erratically. You could go for your big cashies. You could go for the guys, not necessarily cashies. You go for the hard hitters, the guys up here. Your Joseph Leilua. Who knows? He could have another outbreak season like that. That was absolutely nuts that he was able to do that. But at $464,000 for a center, that's more than what you'd be paying for some of your second and front rowers. That's absolutely insane. The guy could essentially not have a great season there, and you'd be stuck with him because down trading him would be sideways, like to a James Roberts or a Tyrone Peach or Ewan Eichen, and then going anywhere else would kind of screw you. Sione Matautia, I think, is the go-to guy. If you don't have him, I don't know why you wouldn't have him. 21% have him. He's going to be consistently scoring. He's going to go up in value. A lot of people have tucked him away in the second rows, but I think that's a waste. You need to get him in your team to be scoring. The other ones I've gone for is Brian Kelly playing in the centers for the Manly team. Look, I think a lot of people are going for him. He's just a cashy. Talakai's obviously in for Aaron Gray. The thing I like about South Sydney centers more than anything else is the fact that their centers usually score amazing points. Like they usually completely gangbusters. Aviava did it when he was there. Hymel Hunt went absolutely insane when he got the opportunity. Aaron Gray did. What seems to happen is the Rabbitohs usually slide the ball out quite a lot. It brings the centers into the games a lot more, and they just have a good combination through there. Maybe not so much with the fact that Reynolds is out at the moment. I don't know what's going to happen there, given the fact that they've got Luke Kelly coming in. And I remember when Luke Kelly used to play for Parramatta, he used to offload to like the grass. It was the most bizarre thing. He'd run across half the field and just offload to the grass. But I just think Talakai has great potential behind him. There are other people who you can bring in there who I don't have at the moment. The other one is, of course, Nick Cotric. I think a lot of people are going to be jumping on him because he's been named on the wing, despite the fact Jarryd Croker being injured in the centers. I thought he was going to go to the center, but guess what? Whitehead has been pulled to the center position. Nick Cotric has gone to the wing, and that's because Edric Lee has actually gone to the Sharks. So that means to tell me that Cotric is here to stay. He's actually going to go up in value. I think at least 70k. I think he's definitely a pull-in. The other ones who you can bring in that center position is, of course, Michael Chee-Kam. Chee-Kam is going to be playing he was named at the 16th man for the Tigers, which means he's probably going to be coming in the second row. $158,000. He seems to burn a lot of people. Last year and the year before, everyone jumped on him because they thought, yeah, he's going to be starting, he's going to be playing, he's here to make a lot of points, and then just didn't deliver because he wasn't getting the game time. He wasn't being named in the team, or when he did get named in the team, he'd be pulled out last minute. It was absolutely insane. The fact that Michael Chee-Kam is dual position second row center is also great. It's the same thinking with Sione Matautia, except Sione Matautia is actually starting, whereas Michael Chee-Kam's coming off the bench. So it's a big question mark. I could jump on him last minute. I think I'm going to stick with Talakai. Nick Cotric is definitely going to be a lock in that center role. I don't think I want to move anywhere. Jamal Idris is a no-brainer. Like, the guy is an absolute freak. Tackle busting machine, getting over the line, just doing his own thing, offloads. I think he's going to be a definite lock for everyone. Look at that, 56% of everyone else is grabbing him. I can't imagine you'd want to pick up anyone else. Now, the fullback roles, other than Nick Cotric, who we just spoke about, Jarryd Hayne, can't go buy him. Whatever you do. I'm a big fan of the Hayne plane. Remember for Parramatta 3 years ago, he scored like 90, back to back, 3 weeks in a row when he had that freak of a breakout season. He actually had a few freak of a breakout seasons in a row. But the reality is, he is undervalued because last year, it's basically his last year's values. He came off the bench, went into the center role, did another game where he played in the centers, eventually went to the fullback for a game and just didn't get the game time where he could, show his talents. He came over from NFL. He probably needed to get in line with the team a little bit more. So he's definitely undervalued by so much money. It's not even funny. He's probably going to be this year's Ben Barber. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck is hugely undervalued, $286,000. Remember, he had a bit of a sore start to last year and a bit of an injury, which kept him out for the rest of the year, which brought his value down dramatically. 2 years ago, worth $500,000, untouchable for the Roosters. He would continually be making breakaways and no one could touch him. He was untouchable. I think he might, I think you have to jump on him. 50% of the people have. Not a pod by any means, but a bit of a common sense thing. Who else could you grab besides that? Dylan Python, or Phythian, or Python. I'm just going to be calling him Python from now on. I don't know who to start here. Uwade is the other option. Fullback for Python. Remember, Newcastle fullbacks aren't that bulletproof. We've seen Jayden Feeney last year have an absolute shocker. Start at fullback, you thought maybe, he'd get some run meters that kick the ball deep to him, he'd get the ball run up, score, 1 or 2 points every time he ran 10 meters or whatever. Might have had a few runs in the back row as well. And might have had the odd tackle or two, whatever the typical fullback would get, because generally fullbacks will score higher than wingers. That's a bit of a certainty. But for Newcastle, it didn't happen. Jayden Feeney was scoring like 3 points, then 9 points. There was one game where he was on -2 for like half the game, and then ended up scoring like 6 points. And it was just so disappointing that even Newcastle coach didn't know what to do. They put him in the halves position, and they put him back into fullback, and then could Python actually do exactly the same thing? Potentially. I mean, that would not be unheard of. And that's the kind of thing that scares me a little bit. I want to give Python the bit of a benefit of the doubt. I feel like you have to go with him because 22% of people are jumping on him regardless. The other option is, of course, Uwate. Now, Uwate, this is the crazy thing. When a player changes teams, a lot of people are like, a leopard doesn't change his spots. But I think it's going to be the same point I'm thinking about Jayden Feeney, where they played for Newcastle. They barely had the ball. A lot of their front rowers, their halves, were making mistakes. They'd hand the ball over. They wouldn't get to the last set. Uwade barely, could get involved, and that's where wingers usually get their points. It's just attacking stats. The odd try or two, the odd breakthrough, the odd running down the line. Whereas Uwade, the specialist, and that's what he does, being a bit of a speedster, never got that opportunity. 2-3 years ago, Uwade was averaging 34 points, and now he averaged, 18.7. Now, I consider Manly to be a bit of a better team than Newcastle, especially, handling the ball out. They're going to have DC handling out to Brian Kelly to Uwade, setting up some tries potentially, setting up some good runs, some breakthroughs, some line breaks, and that's where Uwade's points are going to come from. I think you kind of have to jump on him. There's not any other way to think about it. It's a bit of a tough break because I want to get another fullback in there. I'm actually thinking Trbojevic to just pull him in because he's at $291,000. I could potentially sack one of these guys and then pull him in and just hope that he's consistently going to be scoring much. A lot of people have jumped him at 22%. Now, the crazy thing about him is his dual position center fullback, which is great news, but Trbojevic's stats from center to fullback aren't that different. Like, people are going to think, well, he's definitely going to be playing fullback. He'll definitely be scoring way more points than when he was halving season last year where he played center. That's not obviously the case, because if you look at his stats on a per game basis, he actually doesn't do that to the degree that people think. So I'm kind of stuck here of anyone else that I kind of want to jump on, but this is my team. That's my team going into the first round. They might change last minute because, you know, there's going to be announcements just before the games with their team list of 1 to 17 before the game kickoff, and that's when you know if they're definitely going to be a lock, like some of my Newcastle Harveys. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below if you think I should be changing anyone, if you think that, you know, you've got a different idea of thinking, if you think this is not going to be the right plateau, if you think that potentially Cameron Smith should be rule number 1 and you should be locking him in. That's pretty much my team list. I'm going with it. I'm going to give it my all this season. I will be doing videos all the way through to round 26. So be sure to subscribe, and I hope you guys enjoy this series. I'll upload a video every Wednesday for you guys to watch before the game so I can kind of walk through my picks and potentially help some of you guys out with ideas, maybe a weekly tip, or this is an idea, or this is a new player coming in. So, you know, maybe you scratch my back, I scratch yours, and we'll do well in fantasy together. My target this season is the top 100. I think it's doable. I've done it once before. I've done it 2 years ago. Last year I got in the top 1,000. Fortunately, there was a couple of, you know, injuries there that kind of pushed me back a fair bit. But, you know, that was bygones. You keep looking in the past, you're going to be stuck. This is this year. So I'm pretty excited, guys. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think. And tell me if you have any similarities as well. And we'll chat very soon.